Okay, awesome. So, first of all, thanks to Aditya and Omkar for collaborating with me on creating this webinar series for machine learning for beginners. And also, I would like to thank Devanshu for joining as the first speaker for our webinar series. And so the aim of this webinar series is to help the beginners in machine learning domain to understand what the industry looks like and what are the demands and how they can plan their career to understand what exactly needs to be done in order to get a job or get a research domain in the field of machine learning. And also this webinar would be helpful to get in contact with people who are already into the industry. For example, in this case it's Devanshu. And I'll just briefly introduce whosoever is on the screen as of now, starting from me. So I'm Jay. I'm a research assistant at Arizona State University, and I'm pursuing my graduate studies in artificial intelligence with a focus on computer vision. And we have Devanshu on the screen, who is a software engineer who is working at Google YouTube in the popularly known homepage recommendations. And Aditya, Omkar, would you like to go?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Omkar. I'm doing a master's in New York at New York University in computer science, and I'm trying to focus my studies in the computer vision domain as of now. And I'm a DAIICT alumni, and so is Aditya and Jay and Devanshu. So I think uh, it, I think we'll have a great first video. Aditya, you can continue.
Yeah, so my name is Aditya Zogrekar. I'm currently studying Masters in Computer Science at UCLA. And all the three others on the show today, I'm also an ML enthusiast. So I'm sure this would be a scintillating conversation full of insights. And so thank you for having me on the show, Jay.
Okay, cool. Devanshu, would you like to go?
Hey, my name is Devanshu. I am a DICT pass out in 2016. I did my master's in UPenn, and I'm here at YouTube working on homepage recommendations.
Okay, cool. Okay, so one of the
Oh,
questions.
also,
Yeah, sure.
before we continue, like all the opinions that I will say in this show are my own and not represent
Sure.
my company. Yeah, it's important to say such stuff.
Right.
Yes.
These are some of the things we need to pick up. So,
Yeah. Yes. So one of the questions that we would like to ask. So like, what was the first start of your professional career, as in into the machine learning domain or AI domain? What was the first professional start into that domain for you?
So I would say it was during my research internship at IIT Bombay. So we were actually, I think it was Eklavya program. I don't know if it still goes on, but I was one of the participants in that. And with in that program, I worked on recommendation system. In fact, with recommending educational videos and stuff like that. So that was one of the first uh, projects that I worked in machine learning domain. Then I took some course. There weren't many machine learning courses offered in DICT back then, but I did one graduate level course with Dr. Prasenjit Majumdar on information retrieval, and that was probably one of my first coursework where I learned machine learning courses and did projects like that. So I think that was my entry into, and that's where I picked up my interest in this domain.
Right.
So would you say that in general, in order to start out with picking up some basic coursework or trying to find some basic internship with a professor or a research project, is that the recommended way to start with machine learning?
I mean, to each his own, right? I mean,
Right.
that was my entry into it. But to be honest, I haven't really tried any of the Kaggle or KD nuggets or stuff like that. But I know many people who have done stuff like that and done some amazing projects and are really well-known people and are really skillful. But I personally preferred more personal approach, like working with professor and asking for research projects and working with other teammates. I felt like doing so will allow me to get more like soft skills and be able to talk more about such stuff, and which I think are important in this field and will help me network a lot as well. So
Okay.
Right.
I wanted to ask one question about how you actually use machine learning in the industry. Like what we do in projects, it's like we pick up the data set, we have tried 2 or 3 algorithms, and we take the one which with the highest score. So, how is it in the industry? Is it different? Do you
it's the
follow a specific
same,
path?
right? It's the same, right? But just the scale matters now. With the scoring, like how do you experiment with some stuff for which there is no really a good measurement? Like for recommendation system, how do you measure user satisfaction? So those are some of
Uh,
the challenges that are there. But those challenges are present in many other domains like machine translation or chatbots and stuff like that.
but like machine translation has scores on which you can measure like blue score.
Yeah, but
So
there are some that's not entirely reliable, right? I mean,
Right.
because score
yeah,
just measures the n-gram overlaps,
yeah,
which may not really measure grammatical sense and
that is true.
relevance.
And
Yeah.
maybe the problems which you work on in industry, they are more open-ended rather than the sort of close-ended problems we are used to in assignments or maybe even projects.
Say that again.
So maybe the problems which you work in industry, they are more open-ended.
Oh, yeah. I mean, open-ended in some sense, like I said about evaluation. Evaluation is more open-ended. How do you measure user satisfaction, and how do you measure that you don't have to show these videos? How do you classify trashy videos? Like stuff like that. Like there's no one hard and fast rule on how to evaluate. That's my take on that.
So, based on what the workspace at YouTube you looks like, how would you suggest what are the duties of common machine learning or data science engineers? How would you define what exactly the kind of work are they assigned look like?
So I I it's my belief that the major duty is to come up with ideas. So I mean, all the algorithms, like that part is easy. Like that's what my manager says. Like uh come algorithms are out there, implementing them is easy, but how do you analyze that what went wrong? Like sometimes all the signals that you get, they are not always helpful, but how do you analyze what went wrong? How, like, our intuition is not really wrong in that manner, right? There is something internally in the model that's creating some havoc with inside, which we don't really understand. So I think the major responsibility is to analyze, like do SQL queries and map reduce jobs and analyze like what's happening in the model, collect some statistics, and
So,
like be able to explain the results well.
so would you say there is a major overlap between common duties of a software engineer in a machine learning or data science engineer, or is there a distinct uh, the difference in between whatever they are working on?
So from what I have realized is that uh, data scientists at Google are like involved in assessing or mainly evaluating Google's products, like how well is a model working, like is one of the nominator working well, like is are is this is this creating an overhead in the system and not really giving out much performance gains,
Right.
whereas a machine learning engineer I feel is more related to the modeling side of things, like creating out new ideas, creating new models, and like implementing new signals and stuff like that.
Right. And so, for example, a newbie in the domain of machine learning, he's really excited about machine learning and AI applications. What would you suggest he should be focusing more on, and what should be a pathway for him to understand the basics, or the, what I say, the basic learning algorithms? How should he start with? What sources did you use versus what you learned you shouldn't have done, the do's and don'ts of starting your career as a machine learning, if he's in undergrad, masters, or whatever education level? What would you suggest?
Uh, I suggest like choose it carefully. I mean, there is the AI is so popular that everyone wants to get into it, but doesn't really understand what is going on in there. Like just talk to professor and talk to some TAs as well, and just take something simple and see if you like it. And don't really make long-term goals, but just take it easy, make some short-term goals and try a breadth of things and really find your interest, which I felt I didn't do because my beginning of my third year, I just went into machine learning and try to get into that, made really long-term goals and didn't really explore other projects. But that's one of the things that I felt I could have done better. And even then, like, don't just think that you can do machine learning with Kaggle and KD nuggets. I mean, that's my personal opinion that personal touch is necessary. You need to develop soft skills and network well. So just talk to as many people as you can, go to conferences, go to meetups, talk to your TAs, RAs, and just get a feel of things, collaborate with other people. Yeah.
Right. And
And here a common dilemma which people face is whether to focus more on the research side of when they are trying to get into ML. Do they work on developing their software engineering skills or maybe work on research internships? Because many of them have choice of whether to go in for in summer, say, especially of third year, whether to work in a company or go in for a research internship. So, what is your opinion? What is more useful in the longer run?
I feel like industrial experience is necessary. So, and the reason why is that in the 4 years, you rarely get a chance of industrial internship. I mean, getting a good industrial internship is really hard at a good company. And I think you should not miss that. You can do research internship or research assistance in during the semester as well, but that may not be possible for the industrial internship. I've known some people who did industrial internships as software engineer and then went on to and they network well at the company and then they can get in as an ML engineer talking to other managers. I think there's some noise.
I guess it's from Aditya.
Oh yeah, it's fine now.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I felt. I mean, industrial internships allow a really good opportunity to network well and get some real world experience in that matter.
And in your experience, like, you have some good internships on your profile, say starting from, as you mentioned, IIT, Amazon, Uber, and now landing into a YouTube. So in your personal opinion, what would you say, what made you stand out in front of other candidates that made you get selected into these great name companies? So what was that unique feature you felt that made you stand out from the other candidates that might not have selected for this roles?
See, it looks like I landed all these good jobs, but there were really good rejections behind it. Like Uber, I only got my internships in March, and I was late March, and I was starting in May. and like I got all sort of rejections starting from September. LinkedIn, Microsoft, Google, everyone rejected me. So I don't really know what stood me apart, but I guess it just happened by luck. Because
Sure.
if anything stood me apart, I should have gotten those jobs as well. But anyways, so I don't really have an answer to that question. I think it's just you try and
Right.
eventually it happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And since we're on the topic of industry, do you have any idea about the AI industry in other countries, like apart from US and India? Like, can a master student in US consider opportunities abroad, like maybe Canada or London, to name a few?
Well, to be honest, I don't really know the market there. Like I don't really know any companies which are from these countries which are really doing well and don't have a headquarter in Silicon Valley. I
Okay.
mean,
Right.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
I got that question that with the anti-immigrant sentiment in the US,
yeah.
but should people be considering jobs in these countries? But to be honest, I haven't really felt that anti-immigrant sentiment towards me. I mean,
Okay.
it surely is competitive around here, but yeah, I think everyone can do well. There are plenty of opportunities.
Mhm.
Right.
China is
Okay.
doing some great research if you want to go to Baidu, but Baidu also have a
But they have,
headquarters in Silicon
yeah,
Valley, and
even Tencent has
they,
one.
they recently released their own machine learning framework as well, Paddle, or something like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to join that.
Yeah.
And also a lot of
Yeah.
we get a lot of questions from undergrad students confused about doing their masters, or say a master student doing a PhD. So what exactly distinguishes between, say for example, if I have a master's degree, what are there any limitations of a master's degree holder versus a undergraduate degree holder versus a PhD degree holder? What kind of outbursts he can get into the industry, and what are the drawbacks? Or so for example, you didn't do a PhD, so there might be a reason for what you didn't do a PhD, or you didn't prefer doing a PhD, or you did a master's after your bachelor's. So what are the driving forces, and what were the driving forces that didn't convince you to do a PhD? What are your thoughts on how further educations?
Okay, so economically, doing a PhD is a bad decision. I mean, doing a 5 year PhD and then coming into the industry with almost the same salary, versus if you can slog 5 years in the industry, you can get a fairly good position. But having said that, PhD does give you opportunities to network well and land a really good job profile of what you want. Because I mean, I've seen some PhD students who, I mean, the way they collaborate in talking to people, and I think they have, they certain awe in there, like they know what they want to do, and I think that kind of satisfaction you can only get when you're doing a PhD.
Right.
But I think there are other factors like age and what people want to do, stuff like that. If you want to teach, certainly PhD is the way to go. But if you are going in the industry, well, not some job profiles only require PhDs, like research scientists. But for others, like ML engineers, I think you can do well even as a master's degree or even undergrad holder. To be honest, I don't see much difference between undergrad and master's degree. It's because most of the courses that I took as master student, I could always find one undergrad taking that course as well. So I don't think it matters that much. I think it's just the way you progress in your master studies, like how much do you collaborate how much do you do research, how much do you focus on these other things. It's what that makes you stand out in some aspects, undergrad student.
Could you just elaborate more on the masters, things which you are saying right now, like what you should do during your masters?
So like if you have like you should collaborate with your research advisors, like take some research projects, do a long term, make a long term goal, like slug it out, do a internship somewhere in the research area, then just talk to PhD people, work with them, and then publish some paper, hopefully. Like all these factors allow you to
Build connections, network.
and also like make you realize that what you want to do you really want to do the same stuff for 5 more years as a PhD or not? Like I think masters is a great way to like see if you really can do it for 5 more years as a PhD.
Yes, exploring the boundaries of research.
Yeah. As an undergrad, that becomes a little harder because the coursework is so much more, and you really aren't that mature enough in undergrad, to be honest. That's right.
Yeah, that is true.
So, can you like I don't know if you can share or like what does your exact role include? Like, what kind of tools or technologies do you commonly work on? Because we get a lot of confusions between what exactly is demanded out of a machine learning engineer. Should I work or focus more on Python, or should I, if I am applying for a data science job, should I work on R or Scala or TensorFlow? So what is the trend, at least you can say, about YouTube? What are the major expertise that, say, for example, YouTube requires in an new recruit? What would you suggest?
So we use TensorFlow. Well,
Okay.
so that's Python mostly, and some C++. Like TensorFlow backend uses some C++ code, like implementing some operations and stuff like that. But apart from that, I feel like these technologies should be enough. I haven't really encountered much use of any other language. Like I don't know anyone uses R or Scala at YouTube at all. Like everyone with the scale that we have, I don't think R can do it. We just have to do map reduce jobs to figure it out, or maybe SQL in some case, but that just uses map reduce at the back end. So
And based on your interviews that you might have had before you landed a job at YouTube, like what would you summarize? For example, focus on XYZ things before you opt for jobs or interviews or internship interviews. What all things? For example, for a software development engineering internship position, you would suggest that okay, you should always be proficient with Java, Python, and C++. And if somebody is targeting for a machine learning or data science internship, what, based on your interview process that you might have applied before you getting to YouTube, what at least the to do things or languages to be learned for an engineer, what would you suggest?
I don't think ML interview really focuses on the language. I think it's just a basic software engineering interview. I think if you are interviewing for an ML position, you would just be asked some basic questions which you would know based on your ML course in grad or undergrad studies, and some like first questions about your previous projects. And if you can really talk well about your projects, then I think you can get into it. Like you need to be clear about the projects and know it at the back of your hand and really be able to talk about it and have some talking points. That's the main
Right.
point that you need to have.
And
I mean,
to generalize,
yeah.
To generalize the question which was asked before as to how does your work look like? So not in terms of tools or technologies, but how I mean, what does your work routine look like? What is the say the workflow which you typically have to do when you start working on say a project, something like that?
So I am currently a L3 engineer, which is the entry level. So I'm not really expected to come up with ideas. And it's really hard to come up with ideas when all the algorithms have been implemented and have been tested, and like people have been able to work with that kind of stuff. But having said that, I think it's important to come up with some basic ideas. Like, so there are some problems with user satisfaction. Like, how do you measure user satisfaction? So, or maybe how do you recommend really new videos for which you have no training data? So, or maybe how do you recommend some really old videos which nobody has watched but which is really popular for the user, which is really relevant to the user? Like, how do you solve such problems? And I think these are the problem domains that you have to work in, and like really, because you have to understand how YouTube is different from other similar experiences. Like, YouTube is not Netflix. YouTube has so much more content than Netflix, serves so much more users, and so much more different markets as well. So a person with similar, so different time zones have different, say, what do you call it? Like, different countries have different kinds of users, and how do you restrict particular set of videos to them depending on the country policy as well? So I feel like you have to come up with ideas to cater to that, and even a small ideas which not even a moonshot, but just a roof shot, like that can generate 0.001% increase. I think that also matters at such a large scale. And you have, as an ML engineer, I think there's no really hard and fast rule as a software engineer, that you have to increase the speed of the system, or like save memory cost like this, or create a launch of a product or anything. It's just like everything is an open problem. If you have an idea, implement it, experiment with it, and see what's going on, analyze it, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, just figure out why is it against the intuition. Yeah.
And so some of the concerns which people usually have as tech professionals, that tech itself is such a fast moving field, and ML in particular is such a fast developing field. So how do you take some time away from work, and how do you stay on top of your game? Do you have to keep on learning all the time?
Well, I follow some of the conferences. Like, when I was involved with research internships with my professor, I used to follow NLP conferences, but now I'm in recommendation systems. So I attended some Lexis conferences, read some papers about that in Vancouver this year. Then there was some satisfaction and survey-based conference in Zurich, which I followed, and stuff like that. So that's where you can get some references, and not everything is really relevant to Google, but to what I work, maybe, yeah, everything is not relevant to what I work on, but yeah, you have to figure it out and filter accordingly. And
So,
yeah, go ahead.
apart from the conferences, do you follow like any blogs or specific news sites for like machine learning news?
No, not really. I don't,
No.
to be honest, I don't really get any time to do that.
Yeah.
Did you used to any follow before you landed a job? For example, when you as a student, you must have been following some blogs or technical updates. What are the new algorithms? How they are implemented? Or did you used to follow any of such resources?
Well, there were some blogs I followed. So this professor at UMD College Park, I forgot his name.
Maybe I remember. I
So
remember someone following from Twitter.
he had a blog on blogger.com, and I used to follow him. And then he works in NLP.
Right.
Okay, I will tell you it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Offline, but
That's
yeah,
fine.
that I used to follow it
That's fine.
1 year ago, but then yeah, I just changed it to conferences as it is much more recent, and like you really get more latest news just by following conferences and journals instead of blogs. I mean, blogs are good for analyzing, like like some data science blog on how do you implement something. That kind of knowledge you can gain from blogs, but not really latest research ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
And can you give us a few insights on how industry is a little different from, say, student life? So, as students, we have sort of figured out certain things which you need to do well as a student, but I'm sure things are a little different in industry. So, what is your secret sauce for trying to maximize your success?
So what I feel is that as a student, not every student is life is the same. For example, an undergrad student is very much different from a PhD student or a master student or a postdoc. So I feel like PhD student has much more, that life is much more open domain than my job, I feel. But then
Yes.
there are some jobs which are comparative to undergrad student life as well. Like you are given a project, you do it, and then if it's successful, you get
And
you can write it in perf and stuff like that.
yeah. And for example, as a master student, we tend to explore a lot of boundaries of machine learning and AI. So we find a lot of things. For example, computer vision, NLP, AI, machine learning, deep learning, and a lot of techniques that are going on. And each of these, to be frank enough, seems very enticing to any of the master student or undergrad student. So
Mhm.
what do you feel, what's the I mean, I know each of them have a very strong future and strong applications, but what do you feel, at least say for example YouTube, what's the trend moving towards? Like for example, is it towards deep learning more, or is it towards NLP more, or is it towards computer vision more, or not at least in YouTube? Or for example, in your personal opinion, what's the trend moving towards, like, or what the future might look like? Might.
So I haven't really explored much into computer vision. It's just NLP, but from what I feel like is that people need much more comprehensive evaluation measure, comprehensive and reliable, because you don't really know if you're making an improvement if your measures are not reliable. For example, as I told about machine translation or sentence simplification or chatbots, you don't really know what's happening. And the way currently people do it is user surveys and having uh, Amazon workers rate the sentences on their scales, which is expensive and not completely reliable. So I think having proper, reliable, automative measures is the future. But
Yeah.
don't take my word on it. I'm just
Yeah.
graduated.
Yes. Yes. And so for when, like, based on my experience doing grad studies, we find a lot of things. For example, doing proper documentation and proper explanation of whatever work we do. This is something that we not were exactly taught in our college studies. So but it's really important when, at least as a research assistant or wherever you work on. So what are some things that you figured out later on during your internships or your job at YouTube that was much more required than the technical knowledge you have, or what the demand says soft skills? Because a lot of people say they look forward towards more soft skills and not technical background. Some companies do emphasize that they are much more focused on people, recruiting people who have more soft skills. So what are some of those skills you found that you learned the hard way or later on, that you thought were not exactly taught in school and might be useful to have before going for an interview?
Well, for an interview, they just test you on your technical knowledge. I don't think they do on your soft skills. I mean, you do need to know English, I guess, to
Yes.
communicate well. But yeah, even that is not required in some cases. Like you can have a translator, I think. But anyways, for your job, I think uh, the soft skills that I felt was needed. Like sometimes I had to write a design document, and like you don't really know what to document in there. Like what should go in there. Like
Mhm.
what
Yeah,
are the proper measures to
yes.
write? Like what are the goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and stuff like that.
Right, right.
It
I
reminds me of the
don't really
software
know.
engineering
Yeah,
course in
I don't really want to say anything
undergrad.
about it,
The
but
documentation part. Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
that is important, I feel.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that's just
Yes.
stuff that you cannot ignore. You have to do it no matter where you are. Even in a PhD, the more you write, the better. The more you have documentation, the more it will help you. I think it's just
Mhm.
that way. It just goes.
Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, on a parting note, is there some advice which you would like to give to, say, undergrads who are just about to graduate or people who are about to enter industry?
Well, I mean, advice regarding what?
Like
Uh,
some look aheads for, like, you might have figured out later on, maybe some look aheads, like, okay, this is like some kind of summary of what you learned during your application process, or your transition from bachelor's to master's or master's to YouTube, some kind of learnings or some kind of advice to budding
So,
engineers. Yeah.
I think an important lesson is to not give up, because I
mhm.
was not getting any internships or jobs until like my second semester was almost over, and I regretted my decision to come to master's studies when I had a
Being
job. Yeah, but then I think important lesson is to not give up, and everything will work out at the end. You just have to work at it, I
Mhm.
guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's a nice help, like, information from you. And
Okay.
once again, thanks a lot for making this video with us. I hope that
No problem.
this is useful to all the people. And
yeah.
yeah,
I hope.
sure.
Hopefully, this guy gets recommended on YouTube.
Sorry. I don't think I can do that. Like even I can game that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we are planning to do this on YouTube, so, like, hopefully we get some background help. Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for taking your time, and
No problem. I
your
hope I said
experience
something relevant
will
and informative to you.
definitely. Yeah,
Sure.
your experience will help us, and all the people who are watching this video.
Yeah.
Okay.